The galaxy laughed at human warfare, until Earth's veterans entered the battle. Part 1. First Contact and Misconceptions. Colonel Kim Dae-ho stood at his apartment window, watching Seoul's skyline as dawn broke over the city. The morning news played. In the background, the same headline repeating across every channel worldwide. Alien ships enter Earth orbit. He sipped his coffee calmly while the rest of the world panicked. After 30 years of military service across 3 continental conflicts, very little could shake him anymore. "They're making contact in 1 hour, his daughter said, calling from the kitchen. "Aren't you going to watch it live?" Kim nodded, moving to his worn leather armchair. "I've seen First Contact before," he said quietly. "Just not with beings from another planet." The transmission began precisely at 9:01 a.m. The alien representative called itself Ambassador Thrix, tall, with iridescent skin and 4 arms that moved with unsettling grace. Its voice had been processed through translation software, giving it an almost musical quality. "People of Earth," it began, "the Galactic Confederation welcomes you to the interstellar community." Kim leaned forward, studying the being's body language. Even across species, he could recognize the subtle signs of superiority, the slight tilt of the head, the casual dismissiveness in its gestures. 3 days later, Kim received a call from his old friend, General Park Ji-woo. "They want me to brief them on our military capabilities," Park said, sounding frustrated. "The UN thinks it might help with negotiations." Kim met Park at the temporary alien embassy, a repurposed convention center in Geneva. Other military veterans from around the world had gathered, bringing with them strategic documents and defense analyses. Kim recognized many faces, commanders he'd fought alongside, and some he'd fought against. The Confederation representatives glided around the room, examining Earth's military hardware displays with what could only be described as amusement. One alien, introduced as Defense Coordinator Vril, picked up a standard-issue combat knife and turned it over in his slender fingers. "You still use physical blades?" he asked, making no attempt to hide his condescension. "Some problems require simple solutions," Kim replied evenly. In the main briefing room, Park delivered a comprehensive overview of Earth's combat doctrine, defensive capabilities, and military history. The aliens listened politely, occasionally exchanging glances that needed no translation. "Your species has a unique approach to warfare," Ambassador Thrix said afterward. "Most civilizations outgrow physical combat once they develop basic energy manipulation. Your continued reliance on projectile weapons and hand-to-hand combat tactics is quite primitive." An American general started to object, but Kim placed a hand on his arm. "Let them think what they want," he whispered. Later that evening, Kim and several other veterans gathered at a local bar. The mood was somber as they discussed the day's events. "They think we're jokes," said Lee Min-ji, who had commanded South Korean Special Forces before retiring. She nursed her drink, eyes sharp despite the late hour. "Did you see how they reacted when we explained urban warfare tactics?" Beck Taiwan, a tactical specialist who had revolutionized drone warfare in the 2030s, nodded. "They don't understand why we developed such diverse fighting methods. Their technology made most of our problems obsolete centuries ago." "That's their weakness," Kim said, drawing everyone's attention. "They've forgotten what it means to fight without perfect technology. They've forgotten fear, desperation, innovation under pressure." The veterans fell silent, each remembering battles where technology had failed and human ingenuity had made the difference between life and death. The Confederation's offer came a week later. Earth could join as a protectorate member. Humans would receive technological advancements, medical breakthroughs, and interstellar travel capabilities. In exchange, Earth would dismantle its military organizations in favor of Confederation protection. During the UN debate that followed, Kim was asked to provide his assessment of the Confederation's military capabilities. "Their technology is beyond anything we've developed," he admitted to the assembly. "But they lack something essential. They've engineered the chaos out of their warfare. They fight with algorithms and simulations." "And that's a disadvantage?" asked the Secretary General. Kim looked around the room, making eye contact with other veterans present. Humans have fought for resources, for land, for ideologies, sometimes just for survival. We've fought in deserts, jungles, cities, and oceans. We've fought with everything from sticks to nuclear weapons, and throughout it all we've learned that the most dangerous weapon isn't the one with the most power. It's the one wielded by someone who refuses to accept defeat. His words didn't change the final decision. Earth joined the Confederation, eager for the benefits of advanced technology. Military forces worldwide were reduced to ceremonial roles and peacekeeping functions. The Confederation established embassies on every continent, bringing with them marvels that transformed human society overnight. Kim watched it all from his apartment, now with a view of a Confederation outpost that hovered above Seoul like a silver star. He kept in touch with his old network of veterans, all of whom shared his growing unease. "They're too confident," Lee Minji told him during one of their regular calls. "They've never faced an enemy that thinks differently than they do." "Let's hope they never have to," Kim replied, though something in his gut told him that peace wouldn't last. After all, in his experience, the universe had a way of testing those who believed themselves untouchable. As it turned out, the test came sooner than anyone expected. Part 2. The Krevlax Incursion. The first attack came without warning. Kim Dae-ho was having breakfast when his old military alert system, something he'd kept despite the Confederation's insistence that it was unnecessary, began to ping urgently. He put down his chopsticks and pulled up the notification on his tablet. Proxima Centauri colony under attack. Unknown hostiles. Within hours, the news had spread worldwide. The Confederation's diplomatic channels buzzed with urgent communications as reports filtered in from multiple border systems. A previously unknown species called the Krevlax had launched coordinated attacks against Confederation territories, including Earth's first and only colony. "They're using hit-and-run tactics," explained the holographic projection of a Confederation commander during an emergency broadcast. "They strike targets seemingly at random, without regard for strategic value or defensive positioning." Kim watched the footage carefully. The Krevlax ships, angular and bristling with weapons, didn't move like the sleek Confederation vessels. They darted erratically, sometimes flying directly into danger zones only to vanish moments before Confederation targeting systems could lock on. His phone rang. It was Lee Minji. "Are you seeing this?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," Kim replied. "They're not random attacks. The Krevlax are using terror tactics." "Exactly what I thought," Minji said. "The Confederation doesn't understand because they've automated their warfare. They expect logical target selection." 3 days later, Kim received a call from the newly established Earth Confederation Joint Command. General Park Ji-woo's face appeared on the screen, looking more tired than Kim had ever seen her. "The Confederation is struggling," Park said bluntly. "The Krevlax aren't fighting according to any pattern they recognize. They're asking for human military advisors." Kim raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were too primitive to offer useful advice." "Desperation changes perspectives," Park replied with a grim smile. "How quickly can you get to Geneva?" The meeting room at the Joint Command was tense. Confederation officers stood stiffly around a three-dimensional tactical display showing the Proxima Centauri system. The human colony, a sprawling settlement of domes and tunnels built into the rocky surface of Proxima B, was highlighted in red, indicating danger. "The Krevlax have surrounded the colony," explained High Commander Vren, his forearms gesturing at different points around the display. "They've disabled our long-range weapons platforms and communication relays. We cannot understand their tactical approach. They ignore valuable targets to destroy seemingly worthless infrastructure." Kim exchanged glances with the other human veterans in the room. Beck Taiwan, the tactical specialist, stepped forward. "They're isolating the colony," he explained, pointing to the destroyed communication relays. "And those worthless targets are water reclamation units and atmospheric processors. They're not trying to destroy the colony outright. They're preparing for a siege." The Confederation officers stared at him. Siege?" asked Commander Vren, the translator struggling with the concept. "Cutting off supplies to force surrender," Kim explained. It's one of the oldest tactics in human warfare. Barbaric, muttered one of the alien officers. Effective, countered Li Minji. And something your defense algorithms didn't predict? The Confederation representatives conferred among themselves, speaking their native language in rapid clicks and whistles. Finally, High Commander Vren turned back to the humans. We require your assistance, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. The Krevlak's tactics are unfamiliar to us. We'll need transport to Proxima Centauri, Kim said immediately, and authority to implement defensive strategies. You'll have observer status only, Vren countered. Our forces will execute any approved plans. Kim shook his head. That won't work. Your forces don't understand what we're fighting against. We need our own team on the ground. The argument continued for hours until a new alert flashed across the tactical display. The Krevlaks had breached the colony's outer defensive perimeter. Fine, Vren said finally. A small human contingent with limited operational authority. 2 days later, Kim found himself aboard a Confederation transport ship, accelerating at speeds that made his stomach lurch despite the inertial dampeners. With him were Li Minji, Baek Tae-wan, and 9 other veterans specifically chosen for their expertise in different aspects of warfare. I never thought I'd wear a uniform again, said Kang Jun-ho, a communications specialist who had revolutionized electronic countermeasures during the resource wars. He adjusted the unfamiliar Confederation-issued combat suit with a grimace. At least they gave us real weapons, replied Han Soo-jin, checking the ammunition in her rifle. The Confederation had initially offered them energy weapons, but the veterans had insisted on bringing familiar Earth armaments. When they arrived at Proxima Centauri, the situation was worse than the reports had indicated. The Krevlak ship surrounded the planet in a loose formation that made no sense to the Confederation strategists, but that Kim immediately recognized as a blockade with deliberately placed gaps. They're letting small ships through, he explained, to the Confederation commander as they observed from the bridge. They want to see who comes to help. Why would they allow reinforcements? Asked the commander. They're not looking for a quick victory, Kim replied. They're gathering intelligence, learning how we respond. On the surface, the human colony was in disarray. The Confederation defenders had positioned themselves in a perfect geometric formation around the main settlement, textbook defensive positioning that would have worked against a conventional attack. But the Krevlaks weren't attacking the settlement directly. Instead, they had landed forces in the rugged mountains beyond scanner range. They're going to hit you from behind, Tae-wan told the Confederation officers after seeing the defensive setup. Your formation is predictable. Our tactical simulations indicate this is the optimal defensive configuration, insisted the Confederation captain. Later that night, the Krevlaks struck exactly as Tae-wan had predicted. They emerged from the mountains in small, fast-moving groups, bypassing the main defensive line entirely to strike at power generators and water storage facilities. Kim watched the Confederation forces scramble to respond, their perfect formation falling into chaos as they tried to protect targets they had deemed non-essential. Enough, he said, turning to his team. We're implementing Operation Throwback. Soo-jin, take your team to the highlands. Jun-ho, start. Jamming their communications. Minji, you know what to do. As the Confederation defenders continued to falter against the unpredictable attacks, the human veterans moved into action, applying tactics developed across centuries of Earth's bloody history. The real battle for Proxima Centauri was about to begin. Part 3. Operation Throwback. The morning after the Krevlak's night attack, Colonel Kim gathered his team in an abandoned storage facility on the outskirts of the colony. Maps and hastily drawn diagrams covered the walls. The air smelled of dust and determination. The Confederation defense is falling apart, Kim said, pointing to a holographic display showing enemy positions in red. They can't adapt because they've forgotten what warfare was like before computers made all their decisions. Li Minji nodded, her experienced eyes scanning the terrain. The Krevlaks don't fight like the Confederation. They fight like us. Like humans used to. They understand fear as a weapon, Which gives us an advantage, Kim continued. We remember what it's like to be afraid and how to fight anyway. Baek Taiwan stepped forward with a small device in hand. I've analyzed their communication patterns. They're using something similar to our old frequency hopping systems from the 2030s. Not as sophisticated as Confederation tech, but more flexible. Can you disrupt it? Kim asked. Taiwan grinned. Better. I can feed them false information. Old trick we used during the Taiwan Strait conflict. Kim turned to the rest of the team. Operation Throwback begins now. We're going back to basics, the tactics our ancestors used when they were outgunned and outnumbered. The Confederation commander protested when Kim proposed digging trenches around the colony's vulnerable northern perimeter. Trenches? Physical. Barriers? He sputtered, his translator struggling to keep up with his agitated clicks. We have energy shields. Energy shields that the Krevlax somehow bypassed last night, Kim pointed out. Dirt doesn't malfunction. It doesn't run out of power. Despite the commander's skepticism, Kim's team began their work. Local colonists, many with military backgrounds from Earth, eagerly joined the effort. They dug deep trenches in a zigzag pattern, piled sandbags, and set up camouflaged observation posts. Han Soo-jin led a team into the rocky highlands overlooking the colony. These ridges remind me of the Korean DMZ training grounds, she said, as they carefully picked their way through narrow passes. Perfect for small ambush teams. By nightfall, her group had established 5 hidden outposts, each virtually undetectable to standard scanning technology. They used simple reflective materials to confuse enemy sensors, a trick developed during Earth's guerrilla wars. Meanwhile, Kang Jun-ho set up his electronic countermeasures in the colony's communication center. The Confederation technicians watched in confusion as he modified their advanced equipment with what looked like primitive additions. What are those metal strips? One asked, pointing to the makeshift antennas Jun-ho was attaching. Sometimes the old ways work better, he replied, not looking up from his work. Your systems are too perfect. They reject signal patterns they don't recognize as valid. The Krevlax are using that against you. As night fell, the Krevlax attacked again. But this time, instead of finding vulnerable targets, they encountered an entirely different defensive setup. Their first assault team stumbled directly into a trench filled with human and colonial defenders. The close-quarters combat that followed shocked the Confederation observers. They're fighting hand-to-hand, exclaimed a Confederation officer, watching through surveillance feeds. With physical weapons, Kim nodded grimly. The Krevlax expected energy weapons they could detect and avoid, not combat knives and reinforced batons. In the hills, Soo-jin's team waited patiently as a Krevlax scouting party moved through a narrow pass below them. They had covered themselves with local soil and plants, becoming nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. Just like hunting tigers. In the mountains back home, whispered one of her team members. Wait for them to pass, then strike from behind. When the last Krevlax passed their position, Soo-jin gave the signal. Her team descended silently, using simple rope techniques to drop behind the enemy forces. The ambush was swift and decisive. Not a single Krevlax escaped to warn the others. Back at the colony perimeter, the Krevlax encountered another unpleasant surprise. The seemingly random debris scattered around the defensive line concealed primitive but effective pressure-triggered explosives. Technology so basic that the advanced Krevlax sensors, designed to detect energy buildups and radiation signatures, completely missed them. We used to call these bouncing betties, explained an older colonist to a bewildered Confederation soldier as they watched a Krevlax patrol trigger one of the devices. Nasty but effective when you're outnumbered. Kim coordinated the defense from a simple command post, just a tent with paper maps and a few communication devices. The Confederation officers, accustomed to holographic displays and AI assistance, were baffled by his methods. How can you possibly track all units without positional algorithms? One asked, watching Kim mark troop movements with colored pencils. Sometimes seeing the big picture means using a smaller screen, Kim replied, tapping the map. The human brain is still the best pattern recognition system ever developed. As the night progressed, Jun-ho's electronic countermeasures began to take effect. The Krevlax communication network, bombarded with conflicting orders and false reports, fell into disarray. One group of attackers ended up firing on their own forces after receiving tampered coordinates. They relied too much on their tech, Junho explained to the fascinated Confederation communications officer. Just like you do. When the tech lies, they have no backup system. No human judgment to override the bad data. By dawn, the Krevlax had retreated, leaving behind far more casualties than they had inflicted. The colony had held, suffering only minimal damage to non-essential structures. The Confederation commander approached Kim as the sun rose over the battlefield. His posture, once rigid with self-assurance, now showed signs of humility. Your methods are unorthodox, he admitted, but effective. I request that you share more of these throwback tactics with our forces. Kim looked out at the battlefield, at trenches that reminded him of history books about World War I, at ambush sites that echoed Vietnam, at electronic warfare techniques from the cyber conflicts of the early 21st century. Humanity's bloody history, repurposed to defend its future. We're just getting started, Kim told the commander. The Krevlax have shown their hand now. They fight like we used to, which means they probably have the same weaknesses we used to have. As his team gathered for debriefing, tired but triumphant, Kim felt a strange sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since retiring from active duty. Earth's long history of warfare, the very thing the Confederation had dismissed as primitive, might be the key to saving not just humanity's colony, but the entire Galactic Confederation itself. Send word to Earth, he told Park Ji-woo over a secure channel. We need more veterans, all kinds. If the Krevlax want a lesson in human warfare, let's make sure they get the full curriculum. Part 4. The Veterans' Valor. The transport ships arrived from Earth 3 weeks later, carrying over 200 veterans from conflicts across the globe. Kim watched from the colony's landing pad as they disembarked, men and women whose fighting days were supposed to be behind them, now answering one final call to arms. I never thought I'd see Choi Yun-ho again, Lee Min-ji said, pointing to a stocky man with a pronounced limp. Best urban combat specialist in the Asian theater, turned down a general's stars to teach at the academy. Kim nodded. And there's Yoon Hyun-woo, Marine Recon. They called him the Ghost during the African Resource Wars. The Confederation officials observed the arriving veterans with poorly concealed skepticism. Most were older, many bearing the scars and prosthetics of past conflicts. They carried outdated duffel bags and wore civilian clothes. Nothing about them suggested elite warriors. These are your reinforcements? The Confederation admiral asked, unable to keep the doubt from his voice. Most appear to be past their physical prime. War isn't just about physical strength, Kim replied. It's about experience, knowledge, the wisdom to know which battles to fight and how to fight them. The veterans were briefed on the situation and divided into specialized teams based on their expertise. Choi Yun-ho took charge of transforming the colony's main settlement into a defensive stronghold. These buildings are all wrong, he muttered as he walked through the perfectly planned streets. Too orderly, too predictable. We need chaos. Within days, the neat grid of the colony was transformed. Buildings were connected by makeshift bridges. Fake doorways were installed to confuse attackers. Narrow alleyways were filled with traps and choke points. In Seoul during the Second Korean conflict, we learned that urban warfare favors defenders who know the terrain, Yun-ho explained to a group of colonists helping with the modifications. We're going to make sure we know every inch of this place, and the Krevlax know none of it. Meanwhile, Yoon Hyun-woo led training sessions for mixed teams of human veterans and Confederation soldiers. The contrast between the two groups was stark. The aliens moved with perfect coordination but seemed confused by Hyun-woo's unpredictable training scenarios. You're too used to fighting according to simulation, he told a frustrated Confederation officer after a failed exercise. Real combat is messy, unpredictable. Our battle doctrines are based on thousands of years of warfare, the officer protested. Simulated warfare, Hyun-woo corrected. When was the last time a Confederation soldier died in actual combat before the Krevlax arrived? The officer fell silent. That's the difference, Hyunwoo continued more gently. Humans remember what it means to fight when the cost is real. That memory is in our bones. In the command center, Kim and Park Ji-woo studied the latest intelligence on Krevlak's movements. The enemy had withdrawn to regroup after their failed attacks, but long-range scouts reported they were amassing a larger force. They're bringing in what looks like a command vessel, Park said, pointing to grainy surveillance images. If we could take that out, it might disrupt their entire operation. Conventional assault would be suicide, Kim mused. Their defenses would see our ships coming from light years away. Who said anything about ships? A voice interjected. Kim turned to see Yoon Hyunwoo standing in the doorway, a gleam in his eye that Kim recognized from their shared operations years ago. You have an idea, Kim said. It wasn't a question. Hyunwoo's plan was so audacious that the Confederation admiral initially thought it was a joke. A small team would allow themselves to be captured by Krevlak's forces, smuggling weapons disguised as medical devices. Captured? Deliberately? The admiral's translator couldn't quite convey his tone, but his body language showed clear alarm. How would you even hide weapons from their scanners? Old smuggler's trick, Hyunwoo explained. Their scanners look for power signatures and metal compositions. If we use ceramic components and keep everything inert until we need it. 3 days later, Hyunwoo led a team of 6 veterans on what the Confederation officers had taken to calling the suicide mission. Among them was Park Mi-suk, a demolitions expert whose hands bore the burn scars of her expertise. Just like old times, she said to Hyunwoo as their small shuttle prepared to depart. Except the stakes are higher. The stakes are always high, he replied. That's why they called us. The capture went exactly as planned. The Krevlaks intercepted the seemingly damaged shuttle, dragging it into a hangar bay of their command vessel. The alien soldiers who boarded found 6 unconscious humans, apparently overcome by life support failure. What happened next was pieced together later from the team's reports and recovered surveillance footage. The unconscious humans were transported to a holding area. Once left alone, they quickly assembled their hidden weapons, ceramic knives, compact explosives with chemical triggers, and projectile weapons with components that had been disguised as medical braces and prosthetics. Moving through the ship's ventilation system, another concept the Krevlaks had apparently never considered a security risk, the team made their way to the vessel's command center. Mi-suk's explosives created precisely calculated distractions in distant parts of the ship, drawing security forces away from their target. When they finally breached the command center, the Krevlaks' leaders were completely unprepared. Hyunwoo's team secured control of the ship in less than 4 minutes with minimal casualties on either side. How? Demanded the captured Krevlaks' commander when Hyunwoo established communication with the colony. Our security systems are impenetrable. You protected against the attacks you could imagine, Hyunwoo replied. Humans have been imagining ways to kill each other for thousands of years. Our creativity is boundless. The capture of the command vessel turned the tide of the battle. With access to the Krevlaks' communication systems, Kim's forces could now predict and counter every move the enemy made. Within 2 weeks, the remaining Krevlaks' ships retreated from the system. In the aftermath, the Confederation leadership assembled for a formal debriefing. The mood was somber as Kim and his fellow veterans presented their analysis. The Krevlaks exploited a fundamental weakness in your approach to warfare, Kim explained. You fight with technology and algorithms. They, like us, fight with intuition and unpredictability. Our technology is far superior, a Confederation general pointed out. And yet you are losing, Park Ji-woo said quietly. Superior technology means nothing without the wisdom to use it effectively. An alien scientist who had been studying the human veterans throughout the conflict spoke up. You fight as if death is real to you, she observed, as if the possibility of your own destruction is always present in your calculations. Kim nodded slowly. Humans have never had the luxury of sanitized warfare. We've always known that war means blood and pain and loss. That knowledge, that memory, is what makes us effective soldiers even with inferior technology. As the meeting concluded, Kim found himself standing next to the Confederation admiral who had once dismissed his veterans as past their prime. "I believe," the admiral said carefully, "that the Confederation has much to learn from Earth's military history. Would your veterans be willing to serve as instructors for our forces?" Kim looked around at the men and women who had answered the call once more. Scarred, aging warriors who carried within them the collective memory of humanity's bloody path to the stars. "I think," he said, "that might be the most important mission we've ever undertaken." Part 5. A new galactic order 1 year after the defeat of the Krevlax forces at Proxima Centauri, Colonel Kim Dae-ho stood at the entrance of the newly established Galactic Military Academy on Earth. The sprawling campus had been built on the site of what was once South Korea's Joint Forces Military University, now expanded to accommodate students from across the Confederation. "Never thought I'd see the day when aliens would come to Earth to learn how to fight," mused Lee Min-ji, who now served as the Academy's chief combat instructor. "Especially not from us primitives." Kim smiled faintly. Times change. Perceptions change. They watched as the newest class of cadets filed through the main gates, a mix of humans and at least a dozen alien species. Some floated rather than walked. Others moved on multiple limbs, but all wore expressions that translated across species boundaries: determination, curiosity, and respect. "First lesson is at 0800, Minji said, checking her schedule. "Basic hand-to-hand combat." The aquatic delegates from Proxima 4 are still confused about why we're teaching fighting without weapons. "They'll understand eventually," Kim replied. "Just like we did." The transformation of the Confederation's military doctrine had been swift and comprehensive following the Krevlax conflict. What began as reluctant acceptance of human tactical advice had become a complete overhaul of their approach to warfare. Ships were redesigned with redundant manual controls. Training now emphasized adaptability over algorithmic precision. Even the Confederation's sleek, perfect vessels were being modified with features that seemed primitive but crucial: physical barriers, backup systems that required no power, and escape routes that couldn't be hacked. Later that morning, Kim observed one of Choi Yun-ho's urban combat classes. The veteran stood before a holographic projection of a city block, guiding a mixed group of human and alien students through the fundamentals of street fighting. "In an urban environment, the defender has the advantage of knowledge," Yun-ho explained. His once gruff voice now practiced in the rhythm of teaching. "Every doorway, every window becomes a potential ambush point." A tall, willowy alien with 4 eyes raised one of its upper limbs. "But surely advanced scanning technology negates this advantage. Our sensors can map any environment instantly." Yun-ho smiled. "Can your sensors tell which floorboards creak? Can they feel the subtle difference between load-bearing and decorative walls? Can they sense which routes civilians are likely to take in a panic?" He shook his head. "Technology is a tool, not a replacement for instinct and experience." The alien lowered its limb, its facial membranes pulsing in what Kim had learned was an expression of thoughtful consideration. In another part of the campus, Park Ji-woo led a seminar on psychological warfare for high-ranking Confederation officers. Kim paused outside the door, listening to her clear, authoritative voice. "Fear is as effective a weapon as any blaster or missile," she was saying. "Understanding how your enemy thinks, what they value, what they fear, this is often the difference between victory and defeat." "But isn't exploitation of fear considered unethical in combat?" asked a Confederation commander. "More unethical than death?" Park countered. "If causing fear can end a conflict with fewer casualties, is that not preferable to prolonged warfare?" Kim continued his tour of the academy, pride swelling in his chest despite his efforts to remain stoic. What had begun as a desperate defense of a single colony had transformed into something much greater, a fundamental shift in how the galaxy approached conflict. That evening, Kim received a priority message from Confederation High Command. The newly formed Galactic Security Council requested his presence for an emergency session. A shuttle was already en route to transport him to the Confederation flagship in Earth orbit. 2 hours later, Kim found himself in a vast circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from every major species in the Confederation. At the center stood Admiral Thrix, once a mere ambassador, now elevated to the highest military position in the galaxy. Colonel Kim, the Admiral greeted him with the traditional human salute that the Confederation military had recently adopted. "We face a situation that requires your expertise." The holographic display in the center of the room showed a distant star system near the edge of Confederation space. A fleet of unknown vessels had been detected approaching from beyond the galactic rim. "First contact with a new species?" Kim asked, studying the formation of the approaching ships. "We believe so," the Admiral confirmed. "Their technology appears different from anything in our records. We must decide how to respond." Before the Krevlax conflict, the Confederation would have simply sent their most advanced diplomatic vessels, confident in their technological superiority. Now they turned to human expertise before making any decisions. "What do you see in their approach?" asked a council member from a silicon-based species. Kim studied the ship's formation carefully. "They're cautious, but not hostile. The spacing suggests they're prepared for trouble but not expecting it. I'd recommend a measured response, show strength but not aggression." The council deliberated briefly before approving Kim's recommendation. A mixed fleet would be dispatched, Confederation vessels with human tactical advisors aboard each one. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Thrix approached Kim privately. "When we first met your species," the Admiral said, "we saw only your technological limitations. We failed to recognize the true strength of humanity." "Which is?" Kim asked, though he already knew the answer. "You remember," Thrix said simply. "Your species carries the memory of every conflict, every battle, every war you've ever fought. That collective memory has shaped you in ways we're only beginning to understand." Kim nodded slowly. "Humans haven't had the luxury of perfect technology. We've always had to rely on our wits, our courage, and sometimes our willingness to sacrifice for something greater than ourselves." Later that week, Kim attended the graduation ceremony for the Academy's first class of mixed human-alien tactical officers. Park Ji-woo, now promoted to Galactic Security Advisor, delivered the commencement address. "The galaxy once laughed at human warfare," she told the assembled graduates. "They saw our projectile weapons and physical combat as primitive, relics of an uncivilized past. What they failed to understand was that true warfare is not about technology. It's about will." She paused, looking out over the faces, human and alien alike, that represented the future of galactic security. "We fight not because we love war, but because we understand its true cost. That understanding, that respect for the gravity of conflict, is what makes a soldier effective regardless of species or technology." The Confederation laughed at human warfare until they needed us. Now together, we build something better than either of us could have created alone. A defense force that combines advanced technology with the wisdom that can only come from remembering what it means to fight for survival. As the new officers received their commissions, Kim stood at the back of the hall watching the birth of something unprecedented, a galactic military doctrine built on mutual respect rather than technological superiority. "Did you ever imagine this?" asked Lee Minji, appearing beside him. "When we were young officers, did you ever think we'd end up teaching aliens how to fight?" Kim shook his head. "No. But I always believed that what made humans special wasn't our technology or even our intelligence. It was our resilience, our ability to face impossible odds and find a way forward." Beyond the walls of the Academy, Earth had changed too. The once dismissive Confederation now treated humanity as equals, perhaps even with a touch of deference when it came to matters of security and defense. Human colonies were expanding throughout nearby systems, bringing with them not just Earth, culture, but Earth's hard-won wisdom. "We're not just teaching them how to fight," Kim said, watching the ceremony conclude. "We're teaching them why to fight, and more importantly, why to avoid fighting whenever possible." Minji nodded. "Peace through strength, the oldest lesson in the book." "A lesson the galaxy needed to learn," Kim replied. "Sometimes the oldest wisdom is the most valuable." As the graduates filed out to begin their new assignments across the stars, Kim felt a sense of completion. Humanity's long, bloody history, once a source of shame when compared to the seemingly enlightened Confederation, had become its greatest contribution to galactic civilization. Not because humans glorified war, but because they understood its true nature in a way their more technologically advanced allies never had. The galaxy had indeed laughed at human warfare, until Earth's veterans entered the battle and taught them that the most powerful weapon in any conflict wasn't technology, but the wisdom that came from remembering what was truly worth fighting for.